we're going to move on to our next speaker. He is Scott. His name is Scott, leads the Mcafee business across the Middle East and Turkey as the managing director, leveraging more than 9 years of experience in the region. His technology and solution-oriented customer experience spans the last 20 years, working across European, Middle East, African, and Russian markets. Let's welcome Mr. Scott Manson, who will be speaking about Cloudy with a chance of digitization.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Nice to meet you all. I will do the rest of the presentation in my native Scottish tongue, so no more Fusha. So today, guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I see things from a cloud point of view, and how digitization really needs the fuel of cloud to drive it on. We heard from Matthew about the Vision 2030. I'm sure you guys know this far better than me, but from reading a lot of the documentation, there is really only one way that we can meet that from a timescale perspective, and that really is to be able to offer up different mediums and different vehicles to really accelerate digitization. And I really see that cloud is a fantastic opportunity to do that. But it's always that fear, uncertainty, and doubt of making sure we don't compromise data, we don't compromise intellectual property, and we make sure that we strike that balance between controlling data sovereignty, but yet being flexible and agile with the things we can do around cloud computing. So I want to take you on a little bit of a story, a journey of how I see things, and how we can move away from the way that a lot of these presentations first start, which is around fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? But I want to flip it on the other side. I think that we're actually doing a great job, right? We're doing a great job as a cybersecurity community. It's not easy. As digitization expands the attack surface and gives more holes to be able to go after the threat actors and the hackers, it makes it much more difficult for us to protect, of course. I mean, you can pretty much attach anything to an IP network nowadays. And it's a story I've told before. I don't think I told it at last year's MENA ISEC because it happened since then. But I was at an IoT, Internet of Things forum, and I was walking through the hallway. There was a beautiful SOC and NOC demonstration board connecting the unconnected, OT and IT convergence, strategy dashboard with a SIM backend. It was beautiful. It was fantastic to see. And as I walked past, I passed in the open room a standalone toilet. And as I was walking along, I almost tripped over it. And I said to the guy, and it's an hour of my life I'll never get back, I said, what is this? What is this? What are the use cases around a smart and connected toilet? And I know it's before lunchtime, so I won't talk about the use cases, but it's amazing at what you can connect today to the internet, to IP networking. And it would, of course, be a horrible thing to have a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack while you're on the toilet, I admit. So, joking apart, I think that we do always start our presentations with this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but we have a fantastic opportunity ahead of us and something to be proud of. If you think about the proliferation of all those things that have been connected, the onstart of a smartphone, and the applications and all these things, that inflection point of around about 10 years ago, all those things have changed in such a short time, but we're still keeping up. We're still able to put food on the tables at home. We're still operating our businesses really well. So we should not always get hung up on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt and the problems that we do have. The industry, I think, is doing an amazing job, and we're progressing slowly but surely. But there's many more things we can do, and there's things that we can accelerate, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that as we go. One of the great things that's been achieved, I think, in the cybersecurity community is this eradication of the silver bullet. So what I mean is there is no one solution that can really solve cybersecurity issues, right? It's a myriad of products working together. And as we see with Vision 2030, We see more and more digitization in the healthcare sector, smart connected cities, e-government, and also, of course, the digitization experience around Hajj. As pillars of 2030, digitization is a main player. So it's how we facilitate and light up that pillar, give it some fuel to be able to take us to where we need to get to. It seems like a long way away, 2030, but it is not. And if we, as Matthew mentioned earlier, the previous speaker, if we don't go quicker, if we don't try and take a nitro jet stream, we're not going to get there in time. So with digitization at the heart, I think this idea of eradicating the magic, the fantasy of a magic silver bullet. All these vendors that you see up here, none of them alone can solve the problems that we face today. And so the better together message that we need to bring is how we can get a myriad of all those different vendors you see up there, service providers, how we can work together to close the gaps. We simply got to cover and close those attack vectors the best we possibly can. And eradicating that silver bullet is one way of admitting that there is not one solution here. We've got to bring them all together. We've got to be able to bring as many of these things working and close the gaps. So I wanted to use a sporting analogy for you, right? So before I found this amazing industry of IT and cybersecurity, I was a rugby player back home. You can tell by the straightness of my nose and the holes in my head. It's a silly game, but I really love it. I'm very passionate about it. Now, this team here, anybody know who this team is? New Zealand All Blacks. Even the brand comes into Saudi Arabia. That's fantastic. These guys are the most successful sporting team in history. Fact. So over the past 112 years, they've got an average win rate of nearly 80%. And the idea is that they were always the best team in between the World Cups. So every 4 years is a World Cup that all the best teams from around the globe compete to win the World Cup. But unfortunately, despite being the very best team in the world for the past 112 years, these guys started to get a reputation for choking at the World Cup. They couldn't win the World Cup. 5 cups in a row. Over a period of 20 years, it was impossible for them to win the World Cup. They start to get this label of being the chokers. And basically what ended up happening was that they tried to instill a new management philosophy. So instead of using a silver bullet and hoping that they would get to a point of being able to be ready for the World Cup every 4 years, they approached it in a slightly different way. They employed this philosophy of aggregation of marginal gains. So just being a little bit better, improving everything by 1 or 2% as we go. Making sure that all the different facets of their build-up to the World Cup were improved by 1 to 2 to 3% each time. So little improvements for today versus being unstoppable someday. And that's the type of philosophy we need to employ in the cybersecurity world with using digitization and cloud at the heart. Anyway, net, these guys looked at every corner of their planning. All of the different holes. They looked at their diet, they looked at the psychology, they even looked at how the shirt was designed, the grip on the shirt to catch the ball, the tightness of the shirt so they couldn't get tackled. Probably about as tight as my suit, but that's for different reasons. So they made all these brilliant innovations. And the philosophy was that this marginal gain would allow them to be ready for the World Cup. And that's exactly what we need to do in our industry. We need to look at all the different facets and all the different domains, just improve by 1, 2, and 3%. So we move away from thinking that there is a silver bullet to all our issues. None of the vendors can do this on their own. We have to be able to come together a little bit more. So the story is they won not 1, but 2 World Cups. And that philosophy of marginal gain should be at the heart of everything we do in all our organizations. Moving on to the idea of focusing on being a little bit safer every day versus being perfectly hackable every day leads us to this increment that cloud and digitization can really offer us. So without digitization, we see that the plans for 2030 will probably not come about as quickly as we would hope. So we've got to use digitization to be able to pull together, to move those use cases. The stakes are high, and as digitization continues in the kingdom, we need to be able to rely much more on cloud as the engine behind digitization. But the problem is, and as I said at the front, there is an overly driven paranoia around using cloud. And the reason is simple. Because when anything goes from your own domain, intellectual property, national critical infrastructure, IP, it's less easy to control. There needs to be stricter policies, stricter governance. But the only way we can really meet the targets in this world that Matthew talked about earlier, where things are changing in cybersecurity, is to employ and leverage the likes of the cloud solutions that are out there today. I'll mention them, of course, Azure, AWS, many SaaS applications, PaaS applications, and infrastructure as a service. What is stopping us go faster to where we need to get to, so maybe we can make it 2029 rather than 2030, is simply the sophistication of the attacks and the capabilities we have. Technology cannot keep up. Technology cannot keep up. And so how do we close the gap? We close the gap through throwing more process, more technology, more people, and we are not able to keep up quick enough with the demand and the drive of digitization. So this, in essence, this slide shows us why we're not able to keep up the speed of where we need to get to. So, cloud has to be thought of in three different areas, I believe. Got to think about traffic and data to the cloud, from the cloud, but also in between clouds. And again, the previous presenter talked about that bird's eye view of looking up and seeing the, looking through water, if you like, and not being able to see what's going on. You have to be able to hover above and look at the data exchange that's going on between cloud and intra-cloud. The network, of course, does not see that. So we have to have a multifaceted approach, and cloud is really got to be thought of around this standpoint of striking a balance. We cannot have data sovereignty and control compromised just because we need to be fast, we need to have speed and scale, and we need to have the value coming back to us in the ROI. We have to have a different philosophy around it, because if we go too fast, we will fail. If we go too slow, we will fail. So that striking the balance is, and the pivotal point is really, really important for us. So, in the kingdom, the National Cyber Authority, I don't know if there's anybody from the National Cyber Authority here, or whether you're even allowed to admit you from the National Cyber Authority, I don't know. But they have come up with a fantastic guide and documentation. The Essential Cybersecurity Controls came out in 2018. I personally find this so useful when talking to customers about data privacy, about sovereign data, and really it gives us the guides and the rules of the parameters, the floor and the ceiling of where we can go with cloud. Because it cannot be a free-for-all. That's not the way it's going to work. We have to do it in a very measured and strategic approach. So, the National Cybersecurity Authority coming up with this policy, if you like, allows us and guides us to be able to look at, and there are a lot of data in this documentation, by the way, 5 main domains, 29 subdomains, 114 controls. So there's a lot to get through, but we can use this as a guide for us on how quickly we can or cannot go when we're thinking about the end goal. We know what the end goal is. We know where we are today. How do we move forward? So, and of course, this applies to many different entities in the kingdom. So what we have done at Mcafee is we've looked at mapping these controls to cloud in particular. It does call out, actually, I think it's section 4, it's domain 4. It covers cloud computing specifically, and it gives you yeses and nos, maybes and buts and ifs. It gives you a chance to be able to be guided and led. This documentation really focuses on those three things I talked about. It's actually four things. To, from, and between, the data moving across. But also about cloud configuration, because just because you are outsourcing elements of your strategy to a cloud provider, infrastructure, platform, or applications and software, does not mean to say that you are free from responsibility. And the responsibility matrix is where at Mcafee we're spending a lot of time with our customers trying to help them understand how to map cloud onto their drivers and their business drivers and aspirations, but within the parameters of the ECC guide and the policies that are already very clearly stated. So just a quick example here for you. On the right-hand side, of course, you see all the different elements from physical security, connectivity, all the way up to collaboration control. The three towers that we're looking at here: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, of course, regularly understood cloud offerings that are out there today, real and working very well. We see a lot of our customers at Mcafee moving to this space. But what's really important is to understand the demarcation of responsibility aligned to the cyber paradigm. You can see here the service provider's responsibility solely only goes really, even only partially, on the SaaS space to application level security. So we need to be sure from a service provider and an enterprise responsibility, we know exactly who is doing what and why. And this is essential for us to be able to get more from those services that are there. I really believe that there is no way to meet the goals that we have on us and the stress that we have on us in this industry, even though we're doing a great job, by the way. I really do think we are. We cannot continue to grow and take on digitization, ingest digitization, unless we get this piece right. And so I really would advise, and I'm sure many of you are scholars and you've looked at this documentation, it really helps. It really helps you to understand where and who is responsible for which part of the different controls. I'll just use one quick example of identity and access management. So, of course, when you are utilizing cloud applications, and many customers here we know and work closely with are using cloud applications, it's so difficult unless you get your policies correct to understand whose responsibility is it around identity and access management. Is it the enterprise or is it the service provider? Let me tell you, mainly it's the enterprise. It's a mixture of the two, but policy has to be fully and clearly documented in order for you to make sure you don't fall into the trap that in the last quarter, 4 of my customers have fallen into the trap of not having a single sign-on policy which allowed people to enter into their network coming via cloud applications. Simple use case. You think to yourself, this would never happen in my organization. I'm sure it wouldn't. But it is happening. It is happening. And they were able to exfiltrate data, key data. And of course, incident response that we provide was something that we were amazed that this was a problem that keeps coming up. So it's all about responsibility. It's all about the demarcation of understanding who's doing what. So what we have done, and of course we're not the only team to have probably done this, but at Mcafee we're looking at how we can take those essential cybersecurity controls that are in place, well written, and are there to support 2030 digitization. We've tried to take those controls, translate them into how that actually works for a cloud perspective. What controls do we need in the cloud? Therefore, giving you more guidance around what you can outsource and what you cannot outsource. But then, of course, and this is our technology, of course, on the right-hand side, we map how Mcafee's cloud technology can help support you. Because we've, of course, got security on-premise and a hybrid model and in the cloud. But again, this is not about Mcafee being able to be the panacea for all of your problems. No. Because none of those vendors up there or there can do it on their own. We have to be able to handshake, the virtual handshake between each other to make sure that there's no gaps. This is the key. But when we look at the policy, we look at the controls, we're trying to help you map toward them. So if you have time, we are just out front of this door. We've put together a white paper which helps you understand those ECC controls and how you can map your business drivers aligned to cloud and where those parameters are. It's available on a USB just to give you, and we'll tweet it out as well, but it gives you clear data sheets of what is a no, a yes, or a maybe, and where the demarcation of responsibility is. And this for us will help all of us, whatever vendor it is, whatever company it is, try to adopt cloud in order to drive digitization much quicker, because we will not meet our goals if we continue in the status quo. It just won't happen. So we're always trying to re-evaluate, resharpen our tools to be able to get what we need here. So, and again, just very, very clearly here for you, on the left-hand side, we're trying to give you a clear understanding of the different technologies, solutions, and services, and the shared responsibility model aligned to those different facets of cybersecurity that you're looking at, from physical domain all the way up to cloud and collaboration. There is a very, very nice approach within this white paper that looks at how we can help our customers get more compliant, quicker to what the National Cyber Authority is asking. There are deadlines, there are audits that we all know about. We all get audited by somebody. If it's not somebody in our house, it's somebody at work. And what we try to produce here is a blueprint for you to be able to align yourselves to tick through what can be a very difficult process of being auditable and compliant against the NCA regulations. So in short, this is available, and hopefully it will be of value to you guys as we go. But in summary, we are doing a decent job, right? It's not easy. We're always being asked for more, but ultimately, look at the things that we have digitized. Look at the things and the services that have moved to the cloud. It's been very successful, but we can go faster. And I think that cloud is the fuel behind digitization, whether we like it or not. We have to strike that balance that we talked about, the balance between control and flexibility. If we get that right and we crack that code, we will move toward the goals that were being put on us either by the real top or by our middle managers. So thank you very much for the time. As I say, we're out the front and we'd love to be able to share some of this documentation we've put together. Thank you.